Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to today's Advisicon Academy training. This is the second installment of our four-part Modern Project Monday series. My name is Mina Enquist, and I'm a marketing assistant here at Advisicon. We are a group of authors, teachers, consultants, and technologists offering training in Microsoft technologies and project management and methodology. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few things so you know how to participate in today's event. Please review the control panel that should be on the top right of your screen. The audience is muted during this session, so in order to ask questions, you will need to submit them in the questions window of the control panel. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded on the Advisicon YouTube channel for those who could not attend today's session live. Please note that any questions or comments submitted will not display in the recording, nor will any of your personal information be shared. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's instructor, Advisicon's president, Tim Runcie, who I will now hand this presentation over to.
Excellent. Thanks, Mina. Welcome, everyone. Let's see. I think I'm going to turn on my camera because I like to show this. Hopefully that'll see. And Mina, did we make the camera available to everyone to see it? Don't know if we did.
Let me go ahead and check on that.
Okay, no worries. All right, well, welcome, everyone. It's exciting to continue to lead us through the discussion around what will happen in terms of this new launch of what's called Project for the Web, which is the official name. That's kind of a mouthful. We've been affectionately calling it P4W, Project for the Web, or some people just simply refer to it as Modern Project. And then we'll also talk about the power and the differences between that and legacy projects, so the project online environment as it now stands today. So today I'm going to kind of walk through why the new version. Obviously it's there, there's a reason for it. I want to reiterate that, but then dig directly into the life cycle of when do we find the delta between using existing project as well as either the desktop or the online environment, and what do you get, and of course also the comparison between using Project for the Web. I won't spend a lot of time going through lots of stats and numbers, but I think it's important for you to begin to understand how the ecosystem works around Microsoft technologies, and as they release new technology, how you can provide insight and feedback. And then I will take some questions today. I know that sometimes this comes up where people want to find out a little bit more, and so I'm very excited to help make sure this is available for you so you can understand that. All right, so first off, I'm going to start with something that a lot of people don't look at, is called the user voice. Now remember, whether it's Word, Excel, Project Online, Power BI, there's a whole community. And what Microsoft has done is they've opened this up so people can actually have a user voice. And so if you look at the Planner user voice, some of the most common things that are being requested, which is, hey, could we have a Gantt chart? Or I'd like to have subtasks within my Planner board. Or, hey, is it the ability to have custom fields? Or how do we work with some of these? So as you look at these user voice for both Project or Project for the Web, or even if you start looking specifically at the user voice around some of the other technologies like Microsoft To Do, looking at Planner, all of these have the ability for you to put direct input in there. And so there's been a lot of push on the project team to continue to extend the capabilities or to create a much new and easier to use environment for project managers. Now this is kind of my gory technical slide, and I won't spend a lot of time here again, but I want you to understand is that there's a brand new platform. It sits on Power BI, Power Apps, and now what's called Power Automate. Now they've renamed Flow to call it Power Automate. But the idea is that you've got this series of open connectors, APIs, where we can bring information in. You've got this artificial intelligence. We talk about machine learning engine that's sitting there, and of course the common data service. So both Project as it exists today, Project Online, and Project for the Web are both sitting on this platform. However, there's still the capabilities gap, which is if we want to kind of take something that's been around since DOS days and begin building for something new, or at least in the modern 365 environment, you don't want to break any legacy code. So as you think in terms of both looking at Project for the Web and legacy project, which is Project Online, we still need to wrestle through the task management, work management, project program, and portfolio management personas that need to use this tool. And it's very important if we think in terms of a pyramid, is that the idea is that most people are doing tasks on a daily basis, whether that sits in a schedule somewhere or it's your to-do list, or maybe they're working as part of a team and kind of managing that. but yet project program and portfolio management is a level above that. And what Microsoft is trying to do is help bridge the gap between these lightweight task and work management tools and also getting into a much more mature version of how we use project management tools. So in thinking through the structure of this, the idea is that managing project needs to actually go through maturity. And if you think about simple structure of what's been out there, people use Excel, they use SharePoint lists, they have notepads at their desk, they have all kinds of things that they work with. But the idea is to move outside of these simple lists into something that sits on an engine that we can do machine learning, we could do automation, we can actually start creating dashboards and reports. And so if you look here, it talks about Project, Planner, Microsoft Teams, Power BI. Today I'm going to show you something called Azure Boards. If you haven't seen Azure DevOps, this is a central tool for organizations that do development, or if they do or work in requirements gathering, is to ensure that they have a very agile environment. Of course, we have to do, and then we get into what we call workplace analytics. So there's an intense push to grow the abilities of these different tools, but also do it on the same platform. Hence the need for our modern project. Now, if we think in terms of the connected systems that's out there, I call this kind of the spaghetti matrix. And the idea is that managing a project in a series of connected systems or platforms can get pretty complex. And that's where people will just pivot over to Excel or a simple list. But then again, we talk about HR, we talk about doing IT service requests, we talk about ERP formatting or strategic planning, and we do budget forecasting, and then we want to look at time phase data. All of these systems exist. Where Microsoft's trying to do is to say, listen, pick the right tool that fits for you. And as whether it sits in Microsoft Office, or it might sit in the dynamic spectrum, which may be project service automation or field service, or even your ERP system, or perhaps you're working in an Azure environment, which maybe you have development or IT work, is that this is the idea to bring these specifically together. And as these are brought into the view in terms of managing data and making it available for project management, Microsoft Project or Project for the Web sits smack dab right in the middle of that. And yet we have to provide the ability for people to get in, get out, and get back to work. And so if you think about Teams, Planner, To Do, Outlook, SharePoint list, there's a lot of elements that are there. But the idea is that there's a component that brings these all together in that Office 365 environment. And so this will be one of the last slides that we get into here. But again, the idea is that as project managers or project management offices or organizations that are trying to mature their culture, is that the millennials, the Gen X, the Gen Ys, the Gen Zers, they're all saying, hey, listen, we're familiar with technology. We can do it on our mobile device. We need something that's clean, fresh, easy to use. We definitely have to collaborate around documentation and information and threaded conversations. And at the same time, organizations that want some of the rigidity of better and what I'd say more well-managed projects, talking about standards, process, and procedures, need to centralize that information into one place. So as we start looking at the comparison of project, I thought this would be kind of fun to showcase, this is good old Microsoft Project back in its early days. So here it is in its infancy in a DOS environment, and then of course moving to Microsoft Project for Windows 3.0, version 1.0. Things have migrated, from a long way back into where we're going today. And we'll talk about these components and how they compare and how they'll contrast and when you should use Project for the Web and perhaps when you shouldn't. So as we think in terms of getting right into our overall platform structure, again, the idea is that Project Online exists today. And so you have this enterprise environment where you can actually stand up and launch projects. You can do it from the desktop, you can do it from a browser. And of course, we have something that's new called Roadmap, came out almost a year ago, and that these all sit right there with Power BI reporting. But if we think about the new pieces that are added through Roadmap and something called Project Home, which I'm going to also show today, is that these are just kind of the ability for an end user to quickly locate their projects and get started. However, when we talk about launching Project for the Web, the idea is that while we might be looking at tracking and managing these projects, this lighter version of project is not necessarily in the same database, and this is real important. If you're using Project Online and you're already embellished in that, When you spin up Project for the Web, which you can do, it operates on its own environment. It sits in its own database. It is not connected to your global resource pool. It's not part of the securities and permissions model. Yet there's reasons for having it out there, and at some point we'll talk about the marriage of these two things coming together. And that's where we look at Project Home, Project Roadmap, and Power BI now are extended out into your ability to do reporting, to spin up roadmaps and pull that information regardless of what version of project you're using. And of course, your end users can jump into there from home. So let's take a look at our information here, and I think this will be helpful. So let me jump live into our environment. So what we're looking at here is something called Project Home. Remember, this works with both Project for the Web and Project Online. And so these are basically the ideas. I can spin up a blank new project, I can fire up a new roadmap, and then I can actually see a mixture between these. If I zero in on the icon, you can actually see, hey, there's different symbols based upon what I'm creating. So the idea, if I have legacy project or I have the new version of project, I can actually see these as different symbols. And of course, if I want to create a roadmap, then I'm actually able to actually bring in that data. Whoops, let me hide the tooltip there. Let's do that again, and I'll wait for the screen to refresh. There it is, there's the roadmap. So again, we can look across both spectrums, but again, two different environments of what we're building and what we're managing. Now, most of us have grown up cutting our teeth on Project Desktop, and what's important is we start doing a bake-off between when to use legacy project and when to use modern project. The legacy tool is extremely powerful. In fact, the desktop is the most powerful tool in the project management arsenal. We can go in here and say, well, listen, I now want to go in and switch over into a sprint view. And so, yep, the desktop says, yep, we can provide Agile. We can give you buckets. We can help you organize these. We can give you a Kanban board, and we can do this locally in the desktop. Well, guess what? We can also do this for Project for the Web. The difference, though, of course, is that this agileness in the desktop does not translate to Project Online. So when you're building Project Pro, it's only in the desktop that this actually exists. If I jump over to my enterprise environment and say, you know what, I really do have this enterprise project that I want to work with, and let me jump right into Project for the Web. Well, I'm now in a browser. I can use this in any device. I just need a internet access, and I can switch between a grid view. I can load it up and view that information, assignments. I can pop over to my board view, and I can actually switch back and forth between what's the status, or if I want to group it by what we call bucket, I can kind of move in the same environment. So Project Desktop has this, but it does not allow this to carry into the enterprise environment, which a lot of organizations say, hey, listen, we want to keep this Agile component, which is very hot. We want to make sure this is available for us to work with. Now, continuing with that, as we work in that environment, is that we want to make sure that we're in a place where not only we can actually have the desktop, but also, what about custom fields? So if we go back to Project Desktop, of course we know we can add our custom fields here. In fact, as you can see here, I've got work slip, I've got cost slip, I have schedule slip. I can right click there and on the fly insert a number field and start basically going into formulas and graphical indicators. Very powerful, accessible. In the Project for the Web, you don't get to do that. Basically, it's locked into a very tightly configured environment. In fact, if you come up here, we've had questions where people say, hey, listen, I want to add a column. Well, Tim, it says add a column right here. So let's click on that. And when you go to add a column, you notice that you're kind of defined to a list, right? So if I count them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 columns, right? So I actually have 13 columns I can play with. If we talk about the standard columns, there's only 11 standard columns that you get to work with. And the idea of adding buckets or other elements is that's it. And if you think about that, that's what most organizations who are doing scheduling, even with the desktop, are actually using. So what's interesting is I have people tell me that, oh, wow, the Project Desktop's so powerful. I love all these capabilities. And yet when they use Project Desktop, for their default entry table, they basically have the same fields that they use, which is start, finish, effort, predecessors, resources, right? And so the idea is that most organizations aren't actually even taking advantage of the desktop capabilities or the power of that information. We can also come in and do baselines, which is helpful. So if I want to come up to the project tab and say, listen, let's go ahead and set a baseline, I can make these baselines. In fact, I can build these in the enterprise environment. I can lock them down. Very helpful. So if you're doing cost modeling, again, desktop or project online gives you a lot of flexibility. In fact, let me just sneak over to a resource usage view here, and I can immediately toggle in and out saying, say, show me the cost of the work that's going on. I want to know how we're doing by day, by week, by hour. I can break these down and I can see cost modeling here. Project for the Web has none of that. So if I sneak back over into my project environment here, I have duration, effort, start, finish. That's it. And even effort is looking at just you planning the work or effort, but it isn't necessarily looking at over or under allocation of resources. It's looking at what is your timeline, what is the work, and what will it take. And the reason effort exists is that we do have Power BI reporting where we can actually start looking across there, but even the native views, which are not necessarily built out yet, are in a place that says, desktop and project online already have a rich environment for that, but we're going to need to come over into our resource view using Power BI and actually pull that information out of what we call modern project. So as you're thinking of the power between one and the other, this is exactly the juxtaposition that these are put into, which is I've got great strength and capabilities, timeline views and visualizations, but yet at the same time, if I'm trying to work or provide cost and effort, most people aren't using it, yet it exists here. And so what we're looking at is a maturation process that says we can get about 85% of the basic use of project using Project for the Web that is found in desktop or in project online, but we're not necessarily be able to go any further than that today. And so with project on the web or project for the web here, as I kind of sneak back in, is that, yep, I can look at percent completes here. I can quickly check these off, make them done. I can add people. And the idea is that I still have some of that functionality. What's important is the difference in the project management spectrum that we're getting to is really designed to take you from a simple list in Excel to Planner, where perhaps you might have a Planner hub here that you're actually looking at boards or charts or graphs, and you got these cards that you can move around. But Planner itself doesn't have the ability to link activities together. It has no depends on or depends after, basically predecessors, successors. It's really just kind of a task list organized into an agile series of boards or like Post-it notes. Now, Planner does have some great ability to put sub-checklists in here, and you can add attachments, which are very helpful. But when I go to Project for the Web, and I want to visualize some of these things, well, when I sneak over to any details on a task that says, I'm looking at it, when I bring those details in, I've got notes, but I don't have necessarily attachments today. And so as we think in terms of the growth structure of project is that we are fortunately working with the same engineering team. So the group that owns Planner, the group that owns Project, the group that owns Desktop, and the group that owns Project for the Web is all the same team. And as they're looking at continue to add that functionality, they started with a new platform and a new visualization that says, yep, you can do almost all these things. And if you want more, go to user voice and put that in. So example is I just go over to my Microsoft Planner user voice, or you can do a search and type in project user voice. You can actually come in here and put that feedback directly for what you're looking for. And you'll notice they'll start telling you, hey, we got 7,000 people asking for recurring task activities. It's planned. Or, hey, listen, I want the ability to have templates. Well, that's partially complete. Or I want to integrate my tasks with my Outlook calendar. And so as we think in terms of whether I'm working in Azure DevOps, which is an environment that says, well, gee, I can create epics and user stories, and I can go through and add new work items, and I can create test cases, and I can link these together. In fact, I can even have my source code checked in and checked out, and I can switch over and say, well, listen, let's go ahead and go into our sprints, or let's take a look at our overall boards of work that we're working with. I can manage these, and I can also push that same information into what's called Microsoft To Do here. So I can actually see this as an Outlook task list where I can create my running to the store list, or I can go back and I can work with my other tasks that are assigned to me directly out of my Outlook inbox or from Planner, or certainly as we think in terms of Azure boards. But what's important about project, program, and portfolio management is the minute I come back over here and I say I want to do a roadmap, well, we want to actually draw from either our Azure boards, or I want to draw from data in different places. And as I add a row or I want to add something in, is I can actually pull this from a milestone, from a task, or from any project, regardless of whether it's in Project for the Web or it's in Project Online, or basically a published Project Professional schedule. So in doing some of the bake-off, the power in terms of those pros and cons is that while I have Roadmap that can read both, and I have Power BI that can read both, as I start building the old legacy projects and publishing them directly inside of here, I have a lot more capabilities for cost, work, forecasting, where my Project for the Web is much lighter. And most organizations who begin starting their journey down being the unofficial project manager, or as some people call it, the accidental project manager, but I sometimes think there's no accident, is that somebody might be good at organizing them. They need more than what they're getting out of a simple to-do list. They need more than what you're getting out of Planner. So I might come in here and have nice Kanban boards where I can drag things down. But really what I'm not ready for is to build, a earned value schedule with red, yellow, green indicators. What I'm wanting to make sure I can do is I can actually get the benefits of having the grid and the board and the timeline all together, and I can do this from a browser. And if I want to link my activities, I can actually just click on them, drag them, and establish the predecessor-successor relationships. Or in this case, remember, the wording is different now. When we go over to that grid view, we talk about depends on, right? Or if we think about work, it's no longer called work, it's called effort. And we want to know before and after how we're managing this. We now can actually grow up that story. But if you are going to need cost management and cost forecasting, you're going to need to use Project Professional, or basically Project Web App, PWA. So the legacy project still has a strong, powerful role and continue to play a focus on portfolio management, strategic planning, and other areas around cost and resource management and modeling. In fact, if I even go to the desktop version, some people say, hey, Tim, I want to do better cost modeling. And you can come in here and actually say, well, you bet you can. In fact, I don't just have to put a straight resource. I can actually go into my resource sheet here, down there, and I may want to come in and say, listen, as I'm working with my resources, I may want to just take that contractor who is telling me at the end of the year they're going to have a new rate table. So effective as of January 1st of 2020, they're actually going to have a rate that's going to go up plus 25%. And as I add these things in here, I can have time phase calculations appear. Well, you're going to need legacy project, or basically Project Professional or Project Online, to make that happen. If you're thinking about, pushing the envelope, there's a grow up story between what you can start with and how you'll work with your overall project environment. But the idea is that this is heavier. And so if you think about that in just a nutshell, is that you have this heavier tool that a lot of people cringe when they talk about Microsoft Project, yet we can quickly and easily pivot right over to Project for the Web, start typing in our tasks. We can indent, we can outdent, we can use a timeline, or we can actually drop into our planning boards and manage our work by drag and drop. We do this only from a browser, and we're not in a place where we have to do anything different. And so now we get the bang for the buck, which inherently just says, look, we're not going to try and accomplish everything that Project Online has. So all the strengths become the weaknesses of a project, which is in many cases, if Project Professional or Project Online has all these capabilities, it also carries the weight of that, where Project for the Web, or P4W, has none of that today, but it has 85% of what most people are requesting to start working from as you get into managing those pieces. Now, I'm going to kind of tune the final elements here today around our Power BI. That was something that I want to kind of set up, and we are going to present a little bit more in detail around some of the visualizations. So what's great is Microsoft has rolled out a report pack. And thank goodness, because if you go to Project for the Web, there's not a lot of reports there. And so what you can do is basically connect these Power BI reports and start looking at your projects. In fact, if you want, you can actually take your Power BI and have it look across both environments, your Project Online environment and of course your Project for the Web. Now remember, with that is, while you might be looking at a portfolio dashboard of, what are the overall work and project and effort and complete, that means you're going to have to apply a level of rigor on your project schedules inside of Project for the Web that you normally also do in Project Online or Project Desktop. So as we start adding resources, we don't drop them in at 100% effort. We actually begin tuning or managing that. And what's nice here is that, remember, roadmap is that I also have Power BI, where I can start looking at what's going on with key dates, or if I'm looking at high-risk activities that I want to flag, all of this is coming out of that roadmap. So let me bring up that roadmap here. This environment, which can draw from both existing and legacy project information, is all available for us to visualize our data. Let's just refresh it here and pull that information together. So whether it's Power BI bringing the data together, or it's our standard project environment working with this, is that I have the ability to view across both projects. The minute that we want to start doing cross-resource pool or cross-resource management, is that you're going to want to ensure that you have done a level of rigor on what you're working with, and whether the details or the assignments inside a project for the web, is that you'll have to start managing it the same way that you would do your project professional. And again, you can kind of see what's the percent complete, what are the tasks, what are the activities. So bridging two environments, we can bring them together with either roadmap, or we can bring them together. But the idea is that if you want to grow the maturity of project, program, and portfolio management, sometimes dropping the big heavy tool of Project Online on somebody is just way more. In fact, in order to set up the ability to do resource management in project, what do you have to do? Well, I've got to build securities and permissions. I've got to configure the custom fields and views. I have to actually also go and implement a global resource pool, define what those are. So there's a lot of setup where Project for the Web, all I have to do is come in here and say, hey, let's create a new project. So I can go up to the top, and I'm going to change the site. I'm going to go up here and just simply click and pick, and that's it. I just come in and it spins up a Teams environment for me. So start a new blank project, and now I can start setting up securities and permissions just like I do in Teams to have that group and security here, but I don't have the overhead. So all the strengths and power of the enterprise environment are removed, and yet at the same time we pick up the capabilities of the desktop environment to work with. And now I can just start typing, adding new tasks. We'll just call this planning, definition, finalization. Switch over to a board view, and I can start organizing these. These are in progress, that's complete. And you can kind of manage the work and the work activities. Now, with that, in terms of the integration, is that we certainly have it all on the CDS 2.0 platform, which is really helpful. And remember, Microsoft is going to continue to invest in our project environment. This is important to understand, is that this and the capabilities here at some point in time will reach a parallel and then will surpass what Project Desktop and Project Online have. And the idea is to continue to grow without all of the legacy code and things that happen to be in there, but starting with that new environment. So let's take a look at two things here, and I'm going to bring up a licensing question that comes up pretty common, which is, how do I have it? What do I need to do? Do we actually have to go out and buy this? So if you're already using Project Professional for Office 365, and you're also using Project Online, or you're in Dynamics PSA, you already have this. You've got it. You don't need to do anything. People who are licensed for that can certainly use the basically Project for the Web. Again, it's called Plan 1, and if you were actually to go out there and say, you know what, our organization wants to get a little bit more mature, but maybe we're not ready for the big implementation, you can actually look at a very light rollout, and the idea is that it's about $10. Again, this is retail pricing, so if you're a nonprofit or an NGO organization, this certainly would be a lot less. And what's amazing about this is that if we start looking at the capabilities of what Project has, and you're comparing that to, say, Monday.com, or maybe you're looking at Smartsheet or other types of tools, is that they're typically priced at the enterprise level of Project, but this actually drops under the overall pricing. And I'll talk more about that because it's important to set these things in motion. All right, with the last few minutes here, I always like to pause and see if we can't surface any questions from the audience. So if you haven't put a question in the chat window, I encourage you to do so. Looks like I do have one question that's come in, but let's do this. Mina, any questions in the chat window from your end?
There are currently no questions in the chat window.
Okay. Well, we'll give people a minute to add. There is one that I got sent yesterday, which I thought I would just promote. And the question was, what about team members? So let's say you're a team member and you're using the Project Essential licenses. Will they be able to use this project for the web? And so the idea is that with an Essentials license, if you're pulled into a project, you're going to be able to see it. In fact, if you're added as a team member, the idea is if you want to bring somebody in as a team member to work through that, we're really talking about a different security model. And so the idea is that as of today, Microsoft hasn't announced what they're going to do with the formal licensing of what is in Project Essentials. Again, as the time of us shooting this recording today, it may change in the next week, month, or the next 6 months. We're not quite sure. But the idea is that you can invite people in, they can view their assignments and work activities. They can also go into Microsoft To Do, and you can start seeing the roll down of assignment information. Or again, if you're using Power BI, you can surface some of that data. Any other questions? Let's see if we've got any in here, and if not, I'll kind of summarize for us, and then I'll turn it back over to you, Mina.
All right, looks like there's no questions as of now.
Okay. Well, if you have any more questions anytime, you guys know you can reach out to any one of us at Advisicon. But let me summarize for those of you who are kind of doing this, wow, there's a whole new arena project out there. Is it right for me? Is it not right for me? Again, this is just the beginning. Right? The future of project for the web will grow. It's going to continue to grow and at some point surpass what's existing today. In fact, one of the discussions that the engineering teams have back at Microsoft is, will we ever need to have a desktop or a client version or a streaming version? Can we just make it entirely browser-based? And as technology grows, we're going to see some of these features continue to improve. If you want to have a voice to shape that, go to user voice, log in. I think they just need an email address. That's all it is. And let them know what you think. And you can actually vote. And this is how they're prioritizing the features. So Project for the Web is designed for low impact, ease of use. Yet it still provides that 85% of what most people are using in Project Professional Desktop or Project Online today. It works in conjunction with legacy projects. So if you're using Project Online or Project Professional for 365, and you're working in both environments, nothing to do. They actually work in parallel, and you can actually use Roadmap and Power BI to read across both. Again, it will not be included in Project Online views and portfolios natively. So we talk about Project Professional, or we talk about going into the Project Online environment, you go to the Resource Center, those native pieces are not looking at this new tool. So if you want to do that, you're going to have to either retweak some of your roadmap or retweak essentially your Power BI reporting. But it's really allowing people to stand those up and manage those. We've got a couple other topics coming up. We're going to get into other tools, Teams, Power BI, how does it work? If you're thinking about doing your own development against this environment, how would you take advantage of that? Especially for organizations who have project management offices or who really like to automate things. We're going to dig into that a little bit more deeply and help set the stage for that. Again, those will be coming up. We'll have every Monday we're going to do these. And again, if you have questions or you need to kind of just bounce some ideas or even want a private demo, let us know, because I think it's important to understand when to use this and also when not to use this. So all the power and all the structure of Project Online is available, but yet if you want to do it for Project for the Web, you don't have all that overhead or that burden. You can get up running, quickly using it, and just like Planner, there's 159 million people out there using it. Microsoft is betting that there's going to be a large user audience that says maybe we don't need the heaviness of existing project, but yet we still need a little bit more formal structure around that. So with that in mind, let me kind of turn this back over to Mina. And again, I encourage you guys to reach out with questions, comments, or even for more of our upcoming webinar Wednesdays, which I encourage people to register for as we cover some of the other technologies and best practices and methodologies, and even some of the approaches for innovation that we've got coming up. We always love to hear from you. So Mina, let me turn this back to you and we'll kind of wrap up for today.
All right, thanks, Tim. Thank you, everyone, for attending today's webinar. We welcome your questions and feedback. For more information, you can email us at contact@advisicon.com. Our Modern Project Monday series will occur for the next 2 Mondays. The third installment will be next Monday on November 18th at 12:00 p.m. PDT. On behalf of Advisicon, Tim and myself, thank you for joining us today, and we hope to see you participate in future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.